What if I told you the thing that opened my inner vision wasn't a guru's retreat, a crystal, or an expensive course? It was a superfood I could start using tomorrow morning. Not a magic pill, not a miracle. Just a simple daily recipe that sharpened my clarity and gradually changed the shape of my life. Full disclosure, I'm not claiming this will do the same for you. This is what helped me, nothing more. If you like practical, down-to-earth ways to actually feel better and make change, hit subscribe. I post twice a week. When people talk about vibration online, they often make it sound like a physics problem, something about frequencies and antennas. Here's the part most of us miss. Vibration, in everyday life, just means feeling good enough to notice the next right step. That's it. Feeling lighter, clearer, more present. That's what I mean by vibrating higher. It's not mystical jargon. It's a word I use to name a practical shift in mood and attention. You can cultivate that shift. You can design for it. I call what I practiced a superfood because it nourished my inner clarity the way a wholesome snack nourishes my body. 5 years ago, I was sitting in a gray cubicle that felt like a storage unit for the life I'd meant to build. I can still recall the little list of daily irritations like a map of things that wore me down. A neighbor who practiced bass lines until midnight. The crowded bus with its smell of someone else's coffee and old newspaper glue. The weird silence of my office where nobody ever celebrated anything small. And the slow, numbing weight of a sedentary routine that made my afternoons feel like a soft, dull batter. I was hungry for change. I devoured books and videos. You know the type. I read The Secret and watched motivational talks, and I felt motivated for a while. But motivation without structure is like hunger without food. It keeps you moving but never fills you. I spent nearly a year oscillating between excitement and stagnation, convinced that if I just found the right hack, everything would snap into place. Then one ordinary Tuesday, I started doing one tiny thing. I set my alarm 30 minutes earlier. That was it. 30 minutes. Not a 3-hour meditation retreat. Not a mountain pilgrimage. 30 minutes. I'd put on my sneakers, step outside, and walk. The first few mornings felt awkward. The streetlights were still on, the neighbor's bass was a muffled hum, and the bus drivers were already doing their morning sprints. But the walk was crisp. It was 25 minutes, the kind of time that's long enough to clear a head and short enough to be sustainable. I paid attention to the sound of my shoes on the pavement, to the low pitch of that neighbor's repeated chord, to the way the sky slowly lightened at the edges. On the third morning, I noticed a park I had passed 100 times and never seen. A tiny vendor, a woman with a folding cart, opened a thermos and offered a small cup of coffee that tasted like it had been made carefully, not rushed. I bought one for $2, sat on a bench, and gave myself 5 quiet minutes. No phone, no plan, just sunlight and a hot cup and the slow turning of my thoughts. That 5-minute pause felt ridiculous at first, but after a week it stopped being ridiculous and started being reliable. I began bringing a simple snack sometimes, a handful of blueberries or a banana, and ate them slowly in the park while watching joggers go by. I'm not saying the blueberries are a miracle. I'm saying this tiny ritual of walking, pausing, and eating something mindful anchored me. I began to notice details I'd been missing. The way the vendor tied a string on her cart just so. The sound of a child's laugh from a distant playground. The fact that my shoulders dropped when I let the light warm my face. At work, small social moves helped too. There was a coworker, quiet, steady, who would bring photos of his kids to the break room. One morning, after my park pause, I asked him about them. He smiled, and an easy conversation grew. That simple human exchange changed the tone of my day more than I expected. The compliment he gave me a month later, "You look lighter these days," was a mirror I needed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't instant enlightenment. It was simply feedback that the little things were adding up. I started thinking of this cluster of habits as a recipe. Move my body, pause my mind, nourish myself with a small mindful snack or drink, connect with another person for real, and set one small goal for the day. I call that combination my superfood, not because of a single nutrient, but because together these actions fed my attention and sharpened what I now call inner vision, the ability to see what I actually want, not the story I'm telling myself I want. 3 months into the practice, something strange happened. I was offered the promotion I'd been hoping for. Or rather, I thought I would be, until the boss announced that his nephew would be taking the role. It felt like the bottom dropped out. I remember sitting in the elevator, the city rushing by outside the glass, and feeling furious and small at once. All the little rituals seemed to mean nothing in that moment. It was a test, I guess, of how much inner clarity could withstand a blow. For a week, I alternated between anger and quiet collapse. Then, in one of my park pauses, something shifted. Instead of replaying the meeting or crafting an angry email, I asked myself a single question. What did I actually want before promotion became the story? The answer was a whisper but clear. Freedom. Not just the title or more money, but the freedom to choose my days, to spend afternoons writing and afternoons not writing, to travel when I wanted, to work with people who valued what I brought. This moment is crucial, because this is where agency mattered most. It would have been easy to treat the lost promotion as proof that the world was against me. It would have been easy to sink back into old patterns and wait for the next external validation. Instead, I treated it as directional information. The miss wasn't a moral verdict, it was a signal. It exposed a deeper desire that the promotion had been hiding. I started planning differently. I didn't make a dramatic headline-grabbing quit that week. I began to test the idea of freelancing in small, practical ways. I set aside 2 evenings a week for client outreach and learning. I saved a modest emergency fund. I reframed my workday to protect the rituals that kept me clear. That 30-minute earlier wake-up, the 25-minute walk, the 5-minute park pause, the handful of blueberries or a simple cup of coffee that tasted like care. Each ritual was a brick in a little wall that protected my mental energy. When I finally handed in my notice, people acted surprised. Some thought I was reckless. The early weeks were humbling. 1 month I barely cleared the same income as my old job. Another month I made slightly more. It was unstable, yes, but there was also a new kind of steadiness. The rhythm I had built around my inner clarity carried me through those dry spells. The superfood rituals kept me grounded. They made the messy days feel like part of a larger path rather than a wall I couldn't scale. Here's the honest truth. Quitting didn't suddenly make everything easy. Freelancing demanded hustle and learning and discomfort. But because my daily habits preserved my attention, I could see possibilities instead of getting trapped in negative loops. I found projects I enjoyed, collaborated with people who respected my time, and began to design a life that fit the values I had clarified on park benches with a cup of coffee. If you want to try this without overcomplicating it, here's the simple recipe that helped me. I'm calling it a recipe because it's a combination, not a single magic ingredient. Think of it as a daily serving of nourishment for your attention. First, move. Wake up 30 minutes earlier and walk for 25 minutes. It wakes your body and loosens the fog. The walk doesn't have to be scenic or vigorous. I often walked the same block, watching the sky change. It established a rhythm that the rest of my day could follow. Second, pause. Sit somewhere for 5 minutes with a hot drink or a small snack. No phone, no to-do list. If you want to make this literal, a small cup of coffee and a few berries worked for me. I'm not claiming this is medical advice. This is a simple ritual that helped me notice more. During those 5 minutes, breathe, look around, feel your feet on the ground. Let your brain file away the jittery, half-formed tasks that usually crowd you. Third, nourish intentionally. Eat something small and mindful. It doesn't have to be exotic. A banana, some nuts, a handful of blueberries, a piece of toast. The point is not the nutrient profile. It's the act of taking a moment to treat yourself with care. That gesture tells your nervous system you are allowed to receive. Fourth, connect. Talk to one person with real curiosity. Ask one question about their life, their kids, their weekend. Human connection reminds you that you're on a shared path, and small social interactions often spark unexpected clarity. If there's someone at work you've been meaning to know better, start with a genuine, specific question. Don't rush it. Micro conversations compound. Fifth, set a micro goal. Before you dive into work, pick one small, precise, time-bound thing to accomplish. A 30-minute block to draft an email, a single paragraph of writing, a call to one potential client. The micro goal is a practical anchor. It gives you a taste of progress and keeps your momentum honest. Sixth, protect your environment. Turn off non-essential notifications for 2 hours after your ritual. Declutter one corner of your workspace. Keep a water bottle or a bowl of fruit visible. These small designs reduce friction for clarity. Seventh, gratitude and community. At the end of the day, write down one thing that went well and one person you're grateful for. Reach out to that person with a brief message if it feels authentic. It doesn't have to be elaborate. A 2-line text is enough. Gratitude and small acts of community are the engine that amplifies micro habits over months. If you stitch these elements into a morning, you create a daily superfood. It's a small feast for your attention. It's not a promise. It's not guaranteed to change your career overnight. But for me, it became the place where decisions stopped feeling like reactions and started feeling like choices. When people ask whether the superfood is literal food, I say, it can be literal, but it's mostly a metaphor. A blueberry or a careful cup of coffee can be part of the ritual, a tasty companion that marks the transition from autopilot to attention. If you're the kind of person who loves a sensory anchor, pick something you enjoy. A warm tea, a piece of fruit, a slice of toast. I'm not claiming any food will activate you in a supernatural sense. Results vary. The point is consistency and mindful choice. You might be wondering, what about setbacks? What if your boss gives the promotion to a relative? What if bills pile up after you leave a job? These things can happen, and the rituals aren't a shield against hardship. But they do change how you respond. When problems arrive, the muscle you've been building, the ability to pause, to notice your true desires, to set a small goal, gives you options. You're less likely to react from panic and more likely to act from clarity. A few practical tips for getting started this week. Day 1, wake 30 minutes earlier, shoe up, and walk for 25 minutes. On day 2, keep the walk but add the 5-minute park pause with a hot drink. Day 3, introduce the micro goal, a 30-minute focused block. Day 4, practice connecting with one person at work or in your building. Day 5, declutter your desk for 5 minutes. Day 6, write one sentence of gratitude at night. Day 7, review what felt different and pick one ritual to keep. If you want help building a tailored 7-day starter plan, I put together a free downloadable checklist and a short guide that lays out the exact sequence I used, including simple scripts for the conversations that helped me shift. Check the pinned comment or the description below for the link. I put practical timings and tiny prompts in there so you don't have to invent everything on the fly. One last thing. This is not about perfection. I had days where I slept through the alarm, days my neighbor's bass shook the windows, and I wanted to march over and demand silence. I had months where freelancing felt like a slow climb with no view. The rituals didn't prevent any of that. But over time, they made it easier to see my options, to recognize when a dream was actually a mask for something else, and to choose action instead of blame. If you've been stuck, start small. You don't need to redesign your entire life in a weekend. Try the 30-minute earlier wake-up for a week. Notice what changes in your attention and mood. Observe the tiny signals, a coworker's compliment, a clearer sense of what you want. Those signals are your inner vision waking up, slowly, on its own terms. You don't have to do this alone. If this idea resonates, Download the free checklist in the pinned comment, try the 7-day plan, and then tell me what shifted. Join the conversation in the comments. Share one small thing you tried tomorrow morning. Micro habits compound when we share them. Go gently. Start tomorrow. Take 30 minutes back for yourself. Walk through a quiet street. Sit with a warm drink. And tell yourself one small truth. You deserve to see your life with clarity. The rest, the work, the pivot, the messy trials, will follow from that clearer place.